Welcome to Ballot Battleground, Nevada. I'm your host, Ben Margiott, a reporter at KRNV News 4 in Reno. I'm passionate about making politics in this critical battleground state more digestible to the average voter and pushing past the talking points to press politicians for answers. On this show, we take deep dives into the people, ideas, and debates shaping Silver State politics. All 17 of Nevada's counties have certified the results of the 2024 election, bringing this unprecedented election cycle officially to a close. The canvass of the votes, a typically mundane ministerial process, was not without drama in Clark and Washoe counties, though. More on that in just a moment. In this final episode of our first season of Ballot Battleground Nevada, we're going to look ahead to what's to come in 2025 with two great interviews this week. First, you'll hear from Attorney General Aaron Ford, Nevada's top law enforcement officer, on how his office is preparing for the incoming Trump administration. Then, a little later, Sondra Cosgrove, a College of Southern Nevada history professor and the executive director of Vote Nevada, on the ongoing fight to open up Nevada's closed primaries to all. But first, we'll take you inside the Washoe County Commission meeting Friday, where dozens gathered for the canvass of the vote. There was a lengthy public comment period with many citing unproven claims of voter fraud, pressuring the board not to certify, and many more urging them to do their duty and canvass the votes. It ended with a 3-1 vote to certify, with Commissioner Mike Clark abstaining from the vote because of what he thought was a conflict of interest. Let's take you out to the commission chambers Friday morning, where you'll hear from two people in favor of certifying, from two against, then from Republican Commissioner Clara Andriola, who ended up being the deciding vote to certify, and Clark as he recused himself from the vote.
Every time somebody votes against certification, it plants seeds of doubt about our election system and sows chaos. So it's important to advocate for certification because it keeps the system strong and it keeps people trusting the system. And just to emphasize, county commissioners do not have the authority to not certify the election.
But it's important that we consider how those sort of conspiratorial theories play into how voters and constituents here feel about the election, right? And so it's important that we are reminding people that these processes are legitimate, that they are transparent, and that people can have faith that their vote will count here.
Speaker again has brought up issues that we should not even think about confirming the vote.
You have all of these unanswered questions. Did we have a free and fair election? I just think there's a whole lot of questions to be answered.
But the reality is that we have a legal duty, and I have spoken with so many legal folks who know the law. I am very proud of being a person who abides by the law. And if you don't want to have the law a certain way, there's processes at the legislature to change that. Today, as the provisions are written, we have a duty. We have a ministerial duty. It is a function that we are looking at the results that were presented, and we're acknowledging those results and sending those on with any noted errors, but as was reported, there aren't any noted errors in this report.
I'm not an election denier, and clearly the person I wanted to win won the state. However, that does not mean that all protocols were followed and we can truly certify this election with all the errors that I've listed. In my opinion, and based on information I've received, not every vote counted. For that reason, I respectfully request that we separately note any and all clerical errors discovered pursuant to NRS 293.387. Further, based on the issues that I've stated and the fact that the interim registrar of voters and I have the same law firm, I believe it's a conflict of interest for me to vote in this certification.
All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say nay. And that motion passes 3-1 with Vice Chair Herman in the no vote. We will now move to item 6, please.
With Clark recusing himself and Republican Jeannie Herman consistently voting time and time again against certification, it came down to Andriola once more. She joined the two Democrats on the board, Alexis Hill and Mariluz Garcia, and voted to certify officially ending the 2024 election in Washoe County. With that, it's time to look ahead. As I mentioned earlier, we got Nevada's Attorney General Aaron Ford on the show this week. He's vowing to be a bulwark against the second Trump administration, promising to stand up to any effort to infringe on the rights of Nevadans. So what does that mean? Why does his office think that's so important? And how did his office respond to the Trump presidency the first time? Here's my conversation with Aaron Ford. We're joined now by Nevada's Attorney General Aaron Ford, joining us virtually. Appreciate getting some of your time, Mr. Attorney General. Thank you.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Let's start with the statement that your office released this week about the incoming Trump administration. Of course, he will be taking over as our 47th president in January. What did you want Nevadans to know about how your office is kind of preparing for this new administration? Your office was active in a couple of cases against the Trump administration back in the first part of your first term. Tell us about that as well.
Well, first, let me reiterate what I've already said, which is my office recognizes and appreciates the outcome of our democratic process. Mr. Trump is going to be our next president. We respect that. And in fact, you'll look forward to him being able to execute those items that are lawfully within his power to do. But the key there is lawfully. You've indicated that I was involved in a couple. Let me qualify that. There were over 100 lawsuits that my office was engaged in with the previous administration, along with other attorneys general, Democratic attorneys general across the nation, and we won 83% of those because 83% of the time, Mr. Trump and his administration violated the law in trying to enact policies that burdened and undermined the constitutional rights of Nevada residents and other residents across this nation. And so while, again, as I've indicated, we recognize and appreciate the outcome of this election, we will not stand idly by if this president and his administration attempts to undermine the rights of Nevada residents, period, point blank.
In your statement, you said that you want to be the bulwark, and many other Democratic attorneys generals have issued similar sentiments. What does that mean to you and you that role of kind of protecting against what you might see as constitutional infringements that President Trump might try to carry out in term number 2?
Well, there are several ways in which we're going to be the bulwark against those types of efforts. One of which is obviously on the defensive side, protecting Nevada's autonomy and civil and consumer rights, for example, and challenging legal overreach by the Trump administration. We'll file lawsuits that are opposing the rollback of, for example, clean energy initiatives that harm Nevada's renewable energy economy. We're going to be working to ensure that federal policies do not weaken workplace protections or limit access to health care. And we will work with my coalition of attorneys general, the Democratic attorneys general, to ensure that that's happening across the nation. We'll also, for example, safeguard voting rights and electoral integrity. We'll be monitoring and ensuring that we can counter voter suppression efforts that have been taking place all across the nation over the course of the past few elections. We're going to be supporting local election administrators and ensuring that they can do their jobs as well. You can expect, for example, that we will defend environmental and natural resource protections from against federal overreach and ensuring that the federal government does not overstep its bounds in that regard. Offensively, you can contemplate that we're going to be doing preemptive actions to shield Nevadans from Project 2025. We know that Project 2025 looks to undermine transparency in healthcare billing, for example. We know that it attempts to, that we will attempt to enhance the oversight of financial institutions to prevent predatory lending practices. And we're going to continue to move forward tightening regulations around data privacy. So again, these are all things that we think are going to occur in a Trump administration, and we are prepared, have been preparing for this for months.
Imagine there are Nevadans out there that, see President Trump's results in the election earlier this month as, him having a mandate to carry out his agenda. And then other people who might see this and say, he didn't do X, Y, and Z, name your policy in the previous administration. So they might see this kind of statement as being a little alarmist. What would your response to those people be?
Well, I will say in the first instance of the victor goes the spoils, Mr. Trump does get to set his agenda. And as long as he's doing it lawfully, he won't have an issue from us in that regard. But what he will not do is undermine the rights of Nevada citizens. One commentator, I think it was John Ralston, said earlier that my statement is nothing more than a reassurance to those out there that we're going to do our job. He's exactly right. We're going to do our job and ensure that any action that the Trump administration takes is going to be lawful and legal and constitutional. And we're going to represent and we're going to protect every Nevadan in this place, whether you've been here 3 weeks or 3 generations. This Office of Attorney General will stand in the bulwark against any unconstitutional and unlawful infringement on their rights. And I mean that.
Let's take his major campaign promise of widespread mass deportations of people in the country illegally. Is there something that your office can do or is going to try to do to scale that back? Or what does that look like? Do you, I would imagine with your role as a Democrat, don't want to see that plan carried out as it exists or has been proposed?
Well, what I can say is what I've said before, and that is that if he violates the law and the constitutional protections are guaranteed to every Nevada resident, we're going to be there to fight against that, period, point blank. And that's in the immigration context, that's in the environmental context, that's in the employment context, you name it. And so in that regard, we're going to be doing everything that we can to ensure that he follows the law. Like I said, we sued him over 100 times last time, and he lost 83% of those because he would not follow the law. We would not allow him to break the law in an effort to fulfill the promises that he's made on his campaign. And I will say this as well. We're going to be rolling out Know Your Rights campaign materials to people all throughout this state on different issues, whether it be in the immigration context, whether it be in the environmental context, whether it be in the civil rights context, because we're going to educate folks so that they know what their rights are as we engage in a brand new Trump administration.
Take me through a couple of those cases of those 100 that you prosecute or not prosecuted, but pursued in the second half of Trump's first term when you were in office. Which cases stand out? I know there were some that had to do with the United States Postal Service and others having to do with discrimination. Which ones stand out to you?
Well, they all stand out to me, frankly, and I won't try to, prioritize which are the most important. But I can tell you this: in the healthcare arena, for example, we have fought back against those efforts to undermine the healthcare availability to our residents. We've defended the Affordable Care Act. We've defended civil rights in the context of American citizens and immigrants alike. We've defended environmental actions. We defended against encroachments into the employment context, and we will continue to do exactly that. Again, to be sure he has the right to set his agenda, but he must do it lawfully. And when he breaks the law, I will be there and we will stop him in the courts from doing that.
What have you heard from, I imagine, speaking with other Democratic attorneys general across the country? It seems like there's, a coalition of, I don't know exactly how many of you guys there are that are kind of taking similar action and gearing up in a similar way.
Well, there are about 25 of us. And maybe you didn't know this, but I am the co-chair of the Democratic Attorney General Association, have been for the last 4 years. My tenure ends tomorrow, but I will remain on the board, and we will continue to work as a coalition of attorneys general who are dedicated to the proposition that every constitutional right is afforded to people who live in this country. So we're going to do all that we can, working together collectively, but also individually in our own respective jurisdictions to ensure that, again, those protections are in place and that someone is in court standing up for those people who are the most vulnerable in our society.
Still related to Trump, not necessarily the second term, but what he tried to do to remain in power after losing in the 2020 election. What's the latest on the fake elector case? There was the issue with a judge saying that it was not proper in the Clark County venue. You guys appealed to the Nevada Supreme Court. What's the latest there?
Well, we still disagree with the judge, frankly, with all due respect. She got it wrong. We have appealed to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is entertaining that appeal right now. We're expecting a decision. But if we don't get one before the statute of limitations runs on the cause of action that we have available, we will be filing a brand new lawsuit in Carson City. This is not going away. Those who have undermined the integrity of our elections will be brought to justice. I will ensure that.
Has it frustrated you with the appeals and the delays? I mean, we're sitting at the, second Trump term we're about to enter. It's been 4 years since he lost that election, and we still don't have this case resolved. Has that been frustrating to you?
No, frustration is not the right word. But the fact of the matter is, I've been a litigator for over 20 years. This is the litigation process. Things take time sometimes, and at the end of the day, what matters is that people are brought to justice. I'm on no one's time frame in order to do that, with the exception of the statute of limitations. We are pursuing justice in this regard, and our job is justice, and it will be brought to bear in this particular case as well.
Okay, we'll leave it there for today. Thank you so much. Appreciate getting some of your time. Next up, Sondra Cosgrove. She's been one of the more passionate advocates in support of major electoral reforms like open primaries and ranked choice voting. Though question 3 failed, she is continuing to urge lawmakers, some of whom have been open to open primaries, to bring a bill in the 2025 legislature. Why she's continuing that fight, even though the chances may be slim, that's in our interview with Sondra Cosgrove. And I'm thrilled now to be joined by Sondra Cosgrove, the College of Southern Nevada history professor, executive director of Vote Nevada, and an advocate for open primaries and ranked choice voting. Sondra, many titles, you wear many hats. Thank you for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm always happy to talk about open primaries or ranked choice voting or with them together.
Absolutely. And we should point out, if listeners last week noticed that Sondra got multiple shout outs. So we figured this week, let's just talk directly to the source. Sondra herself, always a great resource for us journalists.
You've been doing a really good job with your podcast at really kind of digging down into some of the stories. So I am happy to be here.
Yeah, well, we appreciate getting some of your time. Topic of today is, for the most part, open primaries and ranked choice voting. As I said, it's something that you advocated for and have been advocating for many years, especially on behalf of Vote Nevada, but also in your personal capacity. We'll point out here, too, just as the disclaimer, you're not a representative of the Yes on 3 or No on 3, any sort of campaign, just speaking on behalf of yourself. But as an advocate and a supporter of these reforms, you thought they would do a lot of good to fix our electoral system. What was your reaction when you started to see the results come in last Tuesday night?
It wasn't surprising. We didn't lose by a whole lot. We got over 47%. But the political parties are dead set against any type of change, and they don't want any change that's going to have to force them to compete on a more level playing field. So I was very disappointed in the No on 3 campaign, but it didn't surprise me that a lot of people just said, I'm not sure, and then either didn't vote on that ballot question or voted no.
Even with it having passed by like 6 some points just 2 years ago.
The political parties didn't come out after it the last time. And so there wasn't very much of a No on 3 campaign the last time. But knowing that it very well could pass again this time, both of the parties, but especially the Democratic Party, really came out strong against ranked choice voting.
And you think that's kind of the main reason why this ended up failing? Or were there any kind of missteps by, the campaign along the way that you thought they maybe could have advocated for this in a better way?
Yes, I had a lot of disagreements with the official strategy. So the official campaign wanted to only really focus on the open primary. And they would kind of in passing or kind of reference to ranked choice voting. But for something like that, that's a big change. You really have to talk to people face to face, have conversations. And sometimes it's multiple conversations before people feel comfortable making that type of change. And the official campaign just didn't want to do that.
Yeah, and we did see a lot of people that were on the no side saying it's misleading. You're only mentioning one part of this. We saw that criticism out there a lot, which leads us to today's conversation, which is, what's next for open primaries, perhaps in and of itself, separating it from the ranked choice voting piece of this, which anecdotally, and I mentioned this last week, seems to have quite a bit more support. People are on board with open primaries, and we heard and saw this a lot on social media, not so much with the ranked choice voting. Do you still think that there's a path forward for open primaries alone?
Oh, absolutely, because I heard that too. I heard it from legislative leadership, from the party leadership, from voters. Again, I was on Reddit. People were saying if this was just broken into 2. And over, people said, no problem with open primaries. I like open primaries. If this was split in 2, I'd vote for open primaries. Awesome. Let's do open primaries then.
And you were hearing that, you were saying, from legislative Democrats that are going to be, in control of the upcoming legislative session. They support this?
Sure. The speaker, Steve Yeager, was very vocal on Twitter about not liking ranked choice voting. He also said if these were just broken into 2 ballot questions, that there's a lot of support for open primaries. We just can't do ranked choice voting. Okay, then help us with that. Instead of having to do another ballot question, there was over 660,000 people who voted for ballot question 3. Now, the opponents will say that somehow these people couldn't read, and so they all thought they were just voting for open primary. Great, they were voting for open primary. Let's do that. Let's put a bill into the 2025 legislative session and just pass it.
Have any leaders committed to bringing forward that bill, or where are we at in that process? Or is it just kind of a general, I'm generally supportive of this, but when it comes down to brass tacks, they might not actually bring the bill? Are you worried about that?
Here's what I want. And I've talked to my Vote Nevada members, and they're going to be contacting their legislators to please ask for SB 121, which is a bill in the 2021 legislative session, sponsored by Senator Ben Margiott, to do open partisan primaries. The bill's already there. It just needs to be resubmitted into the 2025 session, given hearings, passed, and signed by the governor. If legislative leadership does not want to do that, then I want them to explain why. I want them to explain why they are opposed to open primaries. 34% of our voters are now registered nonpartisan. That's the largest group of voters when you break them down into groups. And in the state of Nevada in 2020, we voted for a ballot initiative to put a voter's Bill of Rights into our state constitution. And number 9 in that voter Bill of Rights, it says every voter should have equal access to our election systems. So I would say if nonpartisan voters are paying for our primaries, under that voter Bill of Rights, they should have access to those primaries, every single race.
Remind us exactly how that bill from Senator Keffer several years ago would have worked. Pretty much the same as it, was in question 3, where every single candidate is on one big long ballot?
Yes. What that bill says is that every partisan race would now become an open primary. It would still be partisan. You can still put your party affiliation down if you would decide to run, but all candidates would be on one ballot the same. So just like our down ballot races, if you voted for mayor or city council or school board. So everybody's on one ballot. Every voter gets to vote, and you pick one person. And the thing that's different is it would only be top 2. So it would mirror exactly our down ballot open primary races. Everybody gets to pick one person when they vote, and the top 2 vote getters move forward to the general election.
And how would that affect, third parties? Would they?
Right now,
advance often under this scenario, right?
Right now, if you are a nonpartisan or you're with a third party, if you have ballot access, you have a certain number of members, or you get enough signatures on a petition, you automatically just go directly to the general election and you show up in the general election. This is why when we look at like president and governor and these races, all of a sudden people pop up on the ballot that we don't know who they are.
Sure.
They would be required to participate in the primary. So they would not get a free pass to just go to the general election. Now, I've heard from people in the third parties that don't feel that that's fair, but I ask them, how many times have you actually won a race? Are you really advantaged by being on the general election ballot and not having to participate in the primaries? Because we've never elected a third party or nonpartisan candidate through that route. So instead, let them compete in the primary, get their name out there, go to candidate forums, do meet and greets. That way people can get to know you in the primary, and then maybe you would get through on top 2 and then have a chance to win.
Interesting. That bill, did it ever get a hearing back in 2021? Or what's the furthest that an open primary bill or something similar has gotten in the Nevada legislature?
So Doug Goodman, I know you know Doug because he's also been working on ranked choice voting for a long time. He was actually working with a state senator in 2015 to do an open primary and ranked choice voting bill. And that's when we discovered that you can't do ranked choice voting in the state unless it's a constitutional amendment. But then in 2017, Doug again tried to get an open primaries bill. It couldn't get a hearing. He talked to people in 2019. There was no bill. 2021, Senator Keffer worked with us and did an open primary. It got no hearings. So when people asked me, why are you doing ballot question 3? And I said, mostly for open primaries, because I've been working with Doug on it for a long time, trying to get an open primary as our nonpartisan voter registration has gotten bigger and bigger. And over, we got told by party leadership on both sides, no, you can't get a hearing. So it was very surprising to us to all of a sudden find out under ballot question 3 that apparently they love open primaries. So if things have changed, great, then just bring that bill up. It's already written. It's already been approved by the Legislative Counsel Bureau. Give it a hearing and let's pass it.
All right. So just to wrap up here, Sondra, I mean, it sounds like you're kind of saying essentially to legislative leaders, Democrats control the state house. You're calling their bluff. You're saying,
Yeah.
You said you were open for open primaries, then let's introduce this bill and have a hearing on it at least.
Just do it.
Yeah.
Right. A lot of these nonpartisan voters are my students. And many of them didn't even vote this last time, which breaks my heart. We need folks to be engaged at the primary end of it. So there's a lot of time to talk about issues and to work through things. If you wait till September and then start going, be afraid or be angry, then people just get all frustrated and they don't vote. Talk to people back in April and May when everything gets running. Then we won't have to sit and watch the election results come in and see that 18 to 30-year-olds didn't show up.
All right, Sondra Cosgrove, the always wonderful College of Southern Nevada history professor, advocate for these reforms. Appreciate getting some of your time, Sondra. This was great.
Thanks. I appreciate you, Ben.
On Tuesday, after we recorded that interview, Assembly Speaker Steve Yeager confirmed he will not be introducing an open primary bill in 2025. In a statement released to News 4 and Fox 11, he said, quote, Nevada voters soundly rejected the concepts of Question 3. At this time, we are not looking to introduce legislation on this issue, end quote. An individual member could always submit a bill of their own to do open primaries, but that seems less likely now, especially as Democratic leaders signal they are not supportive of this effort. A special thanks to Aaron Ford and Sondra Cosgrove for joining the show this week. As I mentioned at the top, this is the final episode of Season 1 of Ballot Battleground Nevada. Before we take a little hiatus for the holidays, I want to thank each and every one of you that took a half an hour out of your week to listen to our show. I hope you learned something about Nevada politics, gained a new perspective, maybe you were introduced to a new viewpoint, or that you became a more informed voter this year. From the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for listening. And another big thank you to all the people behind the scenes at News 4 and Fox 11 and my parent company, Sinclair Broadcast Group, who have helped make this project possible. I could not do this show without such a solid support system. All right, after 45 episodes this year, we're going to call it for Season 1 and take a little break. I must admit, it's a little bittersweet. This has been an awesome passion project of mine, but it is so much work, and that's why it's important to take a little bit of a break to reset, recharge, make Season 2 even better than Season 1 hopefully was for all of you guys. Don't worry, we will be back for Season 2 relatively soon, just in time for the 2025 session of the Nevada Legislature. We'll see you then.